Imagine the federal government just banning all new iPhones overnight, strictly for national security reasons.
Right, which would be total chaos.
Oh, absolute chaos. And you might think, okay, fine, I'll just switch to Android. But then you go to find a replacement and you discover that, well, Samsung and Google have completely stopped making consumer cell phones.
Yeah, they're just gone.
Exactly. They're exclusively building encrypted military radios now. And that exact scenario is currently paralyzing the commercial drone industry. So, welcome to the Red Raven UAS podcast. Today, we are looking at a technology space that has officially moved past its experimental phase and is just slamming headfirst into a massive structural wall.
It really is. I mean, the transition from novelty to actual critical infrastructure, it happened incredibly fast.
Yeah.
And the ecosystem simply hasn't caught up.
Mm-hmm.
So we are really tracking two major colliding forces today for you.
Yeah.
First, a hardware supply chain that is essentially evaporating under federal pressure. And second, an airspace that is growing exponentially more crowded and, frankly, heavily contested at the local municipal level.
Right, because we aren't just talking about, hobbyists taking photos in the park anymore. We are talking about critical infrastructure.
Exactly. Delivery networks, search and rescue operations, commercial aviation.
Yeah, and they're all navigating this rapidly closing window of time. So before we jump in, for anyone joining us for the first time, I just want to quickly say who we are. Red Raven UAS provides customized drone training, program development, and expert consulting.
At Red Raven, we work with public safety, utilities, and enterprise teams. And our focus is really on one thing, helping you launch and grow a drone program that's safe, compliant, and actually ready for your mission. We do the consulting, the strategy, and the hands-on training that turns an idea into a real operational tool.
Visit redravenuas.com for consulting, training, and FAA Part 107 certification, and check out the current special pricing on our Part 107 course. So let's start with that hardware vacuum, because the timeline here is forcing a massive reckoning for professionals who rely on these drones.
It's a very tight window.
It is. Back in December 2025, the FCC added foreign-made drones to its national security covered list, which in practical terms prevents any new DJI models from being authorized for U.S. sale.
Right.
And crucially, while there are exemptions protecting the DJI equipment that agencies are currently flying, those exemptions expire on January 1st, 2027.
And that January 2027 deadline is absolute. You would logically expect a massive domestic gold rush here.
You really would.
I mean, locking the undisputed market leader out of the United States should theoretically leave this multi-billion-dollar vacuum in the commercial market, just waiting for domestic manufacturers to step up.
Right, but that's where the iPhone analogy comes in. The companies you'd expect to fill that gap, companies like Skydio, Autel, Parrot, they have almost entirely pivoted away from the commercial sector.
Yeah, they're chasing defense contracts instead.
Exactly. Because of the unit economics, building a commercial drone means you're dealing with, razor-thin profit margins.
Yeah.
You have to manage a massive retail distribution network, handle thousands of consumer support tickets, and constantly fight in a ruthless price war.
Right. And when you contrast that with the Department of Defense acquisition process, the commercial market just looks like a massive liability.
Oh, completely.
Defense contracts offer non-dilutive R&D funding up front. They guarantee stable, multi-year procurement at significantly higher margins.
Yeah.
So domestic manufacturers are basically optimizing all their engineering exclusively for the Defense Innovation Unit's cleared list.
The blue UAS list.
Exactly. Because they know the Pentagon is willing to pay premium prices for secure tactical systems. I mean, engineering an affordable mapping drone for, say, a local construction company, it just doesn't make financial sense when you can sell a heavily ruggedized system to the military for 5 times the price.
Which shifts this from just a frustrating logistical headache to a very real, critical public safety vulnerability.
It really does.
I mean, we are already seeing analysts from Drone XL predicting that by the end of 2026, we are going to see the first high-profile failure of a rescue mission simply because a local agency couldn't replace a crashed DJI unit.
And they lack the budget to acquire a defense-priced domestic alternative.
Exactly. And the manufacturer's own product lifecycle is actively making this crisis worse. It's not just new drones being banned. DJI is ending all service, parts, and support for the exact enterprise models that built this sector.
Right. The absolute workhorses of the industry.
Yeah. The Matrix 600 Pro and the Mavic 2 Enterprise, both the Zoom and dual models, they lose support on May 29, 2026. And the Mavic 2 Pro loses support right after that on August 31st, 2026.
Which is devastating, because the Mavic 2 Enterprise specifically is the foundational architecture of modern public safety operations.
Why that model specifically?
Well, it was revolutionary. It was the airframe that successfully integrated thermal imaging, spotlights, and speakers into a rapidly deployable, compact form factor. When support for that specific line ends, agencies aren't just losing a flying camera, they are losing the baseline infrastructure of their nighttime and search operations.
Okay, but let me push back on that timeline for a second.
Sure.
Say a search and rescue team is using an enterprise drone and it crashes on June 1st, 2026, literally 2 days after support ends.
Yeah.
Do they just have a very expensive paperweight?
Essentially, yes.
Wait, truly? Is there no transition plan? Like, couldn't they just rely on a secondary market? It seems like an ecosystem this large would have third-party repair networks or, I don't know, an aftermarket for parts to just stretch the hardware to 2027?
You'd think so, but no. The secondary market is essentially non-existent at an enterprise scale.
Really?
Yeah, because of how these systems are engineered. Drone components are not plug and play. The flight controllers, the electronic speed controllers, the gimbals, they're heavily integrated and cryptographically paired through the firmware.
Oh, wow, so software locks.
Exactly. When DJI declares end of life, the software patches and server authentications you need to calibrate new parts often just go offline. Plus, the smart batteries degrade chemically over time and need proprietary communication protocols to operate safely.
So you can't just, like, machine a new rotor arm if the flight controller refuses to arm the motors.
Right. Operators are currently hoarding parts and cannibalizing their own fleets to keep things flying. But that is a temporary stopgap, not a sustainable transition plan.
So operators are holding on to fading hardware, waiting for a domestic replacement that isn't coming because everyone is chasing military contracts.
Basically, yes.
But okay, even if an operator actually has the right domestic hardware and they have full federal approval, the technology is facing a completely different kind of hurdle in the real world.
Yes. General public.
The general public.
Yeah.
And to understand this, we have to talk about Amazon's Prime Air Delivery program in Richardson, Texas.
This is such a perfect illustration of the social license to operate.
It really is. So Amazon has FAA approval to do up to 1,000 deliveries a day in this Texas suburb. Yet they are currently operating at a fraction of that, maybe 150 flights daily.
Because of severe community pushback.
Severe pushback. The catalyst was an incident in February 2026 where an Mk-30 drone actually crashed into an apartment building.
Which thankfully resulted in no injuries.
Right, no injuries. But a physical strike on a residential structure completely alters how a community perceives risk.
Oh, absolutely. And when you combine that kinetic event with months of intense, localized complaints about the noise, the acoustic signature of the drones, the friction just becomes untenable.
Yeah, the noise is a crucial point. A drone operating at a couple hundred feet doesn't sound like a commercial jet passing overhead. It produces this high-frequency, varying pitch that human hearing is uniquely sensitive to.
It's very invasive.
It is. So as a result, the local government in Richardson forced major operational concessions. Amazon had to raise their flight altitude to 225 feet to mitigate the noise. They had to completely reroute flight paths around sensitive areas and even conduct a brand new noise survey.
And keep in mind, the Richardson City Council only approved this program by an incredibly tight 4-3 margin in the first place.
Right.
And they have made it explicitly clear they possess the authority to reconsider that approval. Getting FAA clearance is essentially like passing your driver's test.
Right, it proves you're safe.
But the community pushback, that's like the neighborhood association putting up physical barricades so you can't actually drive on their streets. You need permission from both to get anywhere.
That is a great way to put it. The FAA certificate does not shield you if a city council revokes the permits required to actually run your logistics hub. If the persistent noise outweighs the convenience of getting toothpaste delivered in an hour, the community will revoke your social license.
Exactly. Which is why the contrast with the Drone as First Responder, or DFR program, in Washington County, Oregon, is so fascinating.
Yes, let's talk about Oregon, because it proves communities will embrace drones when the immediate value proposition is undeniable.
Right. So Washington County launched their DFR trial on February 20, 2026. They were using 2 Skydio X10 drones.
And in just 6 weeks, they responded to over 90 calls, boasting an insanely fast average response time of 45 to 120 seconds.
Which a ground unit just cannot match.
Never. The major highlight of this trial was on April 2nd. A suspect fled a traffic stop, and ground pursuit was deemed way too dangerous because of heavy traffic.
Yeah, ground pursuits are massive liability events. You're weaving a 4,000-pound patrol car through traffic, putting innocent people at extreme risk.
Exactly. So they abort the ground pursuit, and the DFR drone takes over. It arrives in under 2 minutes, tracks both the driver and the passenger as they flee on foot through residential backyards, and guides patrol units to a safe arrest.
It's incredible operational success.
It is, but wait, there's a fascinating contradiction here for you listening. If the people in Texas are furious about drones delivering packages, why aren't the people in Oregon furious about police drones hovering over their backyards?
It's a great question.
Right. I mean, on paper, the privacy intrusion of a law enforcement camera tracking people over private property seems significantly higher than a delivery drone just passing by.
It does, but the calculus hinges entirely on how the technology distributes risk and reward.
Okay, unpack that for us.
In the corporate delivery model, the reward, getting a package slightly faster, is privatized to a single consumer. But the risk, the acoustic pollution, the potential for a physical crash, that is distributed to the entire neighborhood.
So the collective friction outweighs the individual convenience.
Exactly. But the Oregon DFR model inverts that dynamic completely. The drone in Oregon neutralized massive public danger, a high-speed police chase. By pulling the patrol cars back and putting a sensor in the sky, the program actively prevents property damage and collateral fatalities.
So the community implicitly grants the social license because the immediate collective safety benefit is undeniable.
Precisely. They are willing to accept the temporary privacy intrusion because the technology is actively protecting their physical environment. Stopping a hit-and-run suspect earns a social license much faster than corporate convenience.
Which directly explains why the federal government is frantically attempting to manage the sheer scale of the situation. The FAA is actually hosting a massive nationwide drone safety day on April 25, 2026.
Yes, the theme is Fly Right. Drones here for good, focusing on education, emergencies, and the environment.
Right, but the scale of this campaign is way larger than previous years. I mean, there are now 865,000 registered drones in the U.S.
That is a staggering amount of aircraft.
And commercial operations have jumped 18% year over year. So with 865,000 drones up there, is this FAA campaign just like a friendly community outreach event? Or is it a sign that the government is genuinely terrified of a catastrophic mid-air collision between a delivery drone and a commercial flight?
Oh, it's definitely the latter. They don't run campaigns this big by accident.
Yeah.
The FAA's primary mandate is the absolute safety of the national airspace and the traditional architecture of that airspace is breaking down.
Because of the sheer volume.
Exactly. Legacy manned aviation medical helicopters, commercial jets, relies heavily on the see and avoid principle. A human pilot looks out the window and physically avoids traffic.
Right.
But an 18% jump in commercial operations is mostly driven by automated systems programmed to fly beyond visual line of sight.
So when the pilot in command is sitting in a control room 3 states away from the actual drone, see and avoid is mechanically impossible.
Which means the airspace requires cooperative digital deconfliction. You have recreational pilots, manned aircraft, automated delivery networks, and rapid launch police drones all being forced to share the exact same low-altitude sky.
Wow.
The FAA is terrified because a major collision between an automated delivery platform and a manned aircraft would instantly paralyze the entire commercial sector.
It is a moment of profound structural friction for the industry. So to summarize this massive transition for you listening, the drone industry is no longer an emerging concept. It is fully here.
But it is caught between a rock and a hard place.
It really is. The foundational hardware that built the industry is retiring or being banned. The domestic companies capable of stepping up are chasing defense money instead.
Right.
And the programs actually trying to scale in the real world are realizing that community acceptance is just as hard to earn as an FAA certificate.
Which leaves us with a critical question to consider as this transition accelerates.
Yeah.
With foreign hardware effectively banned for commercial use moving forward, and domestic aerospace companies pivoting heavily to the military, who is actually going to build the everyday commercial drones of the future?
It's a huge unknown. Are we looking at a multi-year hardware vacuum that will cause the commercial sector to just stagnate?
Or will this supply crisis force an entirely new, unexpected wave of innovation from a completely different tech sector?
Right, like maybe the next great commercial drone platform won't come from a traditional aerospace company at all. Maybe it comes from an automaker or a global logistics giant that already understands mass production and consumer hardware at scale.
The airspace is heavily contested, but right now, it is entirely unclear whose hardware will actually be flying in it.
It is definitely something to ponder long after you finish listening today. Thanks for listening to the Red Raven UAS podcast. Visit redravenuas.com for consulting, training, and FAA Part 107 certification, and check out the current special pricing on our Part 107 course.